Hi, Misha here, and I think in early 2020 it's safe I can say I told you so. Actually, most of you probably saw this coming as well, but a lot of people didn't. We put out a video about a year and a half ago talking about the future of 545, and people kept pointing out, oh, with the Arsenal SLR104UR is still available, which is very true. But I kept trying to tell them those were imports from 2013 through 2015, back when these were still coming in. This is one from one of the last batches Arsenal shipped out, and you can see the serial number. They imported a relatively large number of these, and while they were well regarded as good guns, reliable, durable, factory built, they were the slow movers. Most people who wanted a 545 Arsenal bought the SLR-104UR, which has been selling gangbusters for the last year or so, but before that, when those were still available, they too sold a little slow. So why is that? Well, aside from the fact that people want what they can't have, that really is the main factor. With the 104UR, that was really it. And most people think that the 104 is perhaps the best stamped Arsenal ever sold. And now that the 104URs have run out, they're starting to go through the stratosphere. So what we have here is a carbine that I sold to a customer, and I'm going to get it ready to ship to him. And I thought I would record a process and talk about maybe why these didn't sell as great and why maybe people didn't recognize them as crinks. AKS74Us. Now, one reason is it has an extended 16-inch barrel. There's nothing you can do about this. All imports for civilian sales since 1968 have to be Title I firearms, meaning all of them have to have the extended barrel. Now, a good way around this is just to import something as a pistol, which Arsenal did with the SLR-106UR. However, the 104UR was special because it was in 545. That gets into ammunition rules. To really make a long story short, it wasn't practical to import a 545x39 caliber pistol. So carbine it was. That was one thing. Another, it comes with the modern black polymer furniture. It's good quality stuff, but I don't think people, when they see one of these, think Krinkov, AKS74U. I think it gives it too much of a modern AK100 series look, and so they just didn't quite see the potential. They also just came with one 30-round mag, standard Bulgarian sling, standard awesome Arsenal box, very sarcastic there, cleaning kit, where'd my oiler go? There it is, oiler, basic paper manual, the usual Arsenal stuff. The thing is, this gun has a lot of potential. You just have to do a little work. And what the customer is having me do is replace the furniture. We're going to take the solid body stock off and put on the classic triangle folder. These are both, of course, 4.5 millimeter. Bulgaria never went to 5.5. And we're going to replace the plastic handguards with a set of Russian used, but in still good shape. Looks like they could use a little oiling, a little dry, but hey, it's Russian crink wood. And while we're at it, we're going to replace this sling, which is a good but standard sling, with a true Russian crink sling. It is thinner, lighter, and it has this this buckle on the end for quick detach or installation. Sorry, it's kind of fighting me. And we could also, if the customer ordered it, but he didn't, we could chop this barrel down from 16 inches to 8.2 right here at the gas block. And since these come already threaded 24 mil with a removable cap, if we were to cut the barrel down and recrown it, then we could actually install with no fuss the original conical booster flash hider unit. Of course, if you do that, it is an SBR. You still need to file a Form 1. So yeah, I thought we would talk about this, give some thoughts and reflections on what is honestly a cool gun, and just generally talk about the crink. And I will refer to it as a crink. It's just less cumbersome than saying AKS74U. Crink is definitely an American name. Krinkov. It seems to have come from Afghanistan, but no one really knows where or why. Just, sometimes names stick. The thing is, when I say crink or Krinkov, you know exactly what I mean. So, as a name, it's serving its purpose. The name is there to tell us what someone's referring to. So, yeah, crink, you know what I mean. So, before we get started, let's show a clip of Jay at the range with his already converted gun. I'll show you what we're going to make this look like, and also prove to you that these are in fact very reliable, because if Jay cannot shoot a gun fast, he's going to shoot it a lot. So, yeah. 104UR.
You look so much taller than me when you're up on the step.
I'm just not crouching.
It's clear.
Alrighty. I've had one of these since they came out in 2013. Very good guns. For someone wanting a crink. It's funny, sometimes I'll have these on the pictures for gun broker auctions, and I leave them there so people will, see it's new. And Arsenal puts them on so this won't chew a hole in the side of their extremely tough and durable box. But people will sometimes ask me, hey, what's that thing? They call it an extended charging handle. Even as we see it here, this does have a lot of crink features. Now, the crink was first ordered in 1973 in Soviet Russia to be a lightweight carbine, what we would think of as a PDW. Originally, the requirements, it needed to be under 30 inches long, was stock open, and it needed to weigh 5 pounds or less. And so trials were held primarily through 1974, 75, several designers, pretty much the who's who in Russia, including Kalashnikov's team, submitted ideas. And the Kalashnikov design won mostly because the other designs were not clearly superior, and his design could use a lot of the same components as the existing AK-74 and AKS-74, and even when it couldn't, it could be made on the same tooling, so it was going to be a lot quicker, easier, and simpler to get in production, and the downsides were pretty minor. It's built on the same 1.0 stamped receiver. Uses a bit of an altered bolt carrier, namely that it has a short charging handle. It also has a short gas piston to work with a very shortened gas system, gas tube. We have a combination front sight gas block unit. Like the AK-74, it's threaded 24 millimeter. The original barrel length is just under 8.2 inches. We have a hinged top cover, which I'll show you in just a minute, that also doubles as the retainer for the upper handguard gas tube. Our rear sight is a flip two position. Just do this. All mounted there. It's slightly taller than standard one. The back is pretty much AKS74. It uses the same folding hinge to the left, same pistol grip with reinforcement plate, although early cranks did not have the plate. And some would have a scope rail on the side if they were meant for night use. Others would actually be especially tweaked to use a suppressor, the PBS-4, but most were not suppressed. What they came up with nearly met the specs. This is about 6 pounds with its original furniture, but it is a little bit shorter. It's just under 29 inches, stock open, or 19 inches stock closed. Light and handy. It took the same ammo, same mags as the standard 74. Of course, it has a shorter range. It's really only good out to 300 to 400 meters, depending on conditions and the skill of the shooter. But really, it's meant to be operated under 150 meters up to point-blank range. Again, used as a personal defense gun. These were used by the Spetsnaz, of course, also Russian police, and they would be first tried out in 1977. After undergoing a little bit of updates and things to the design, they would be officially adopted in 1979, just in time for the Afghan War, where they became quite famous and infamous because, amongst others using them, were the helicopter pilots of the Mi-24 helicopter, a particularly hated adversary by the Mujahideen. These would be produced primarily at the Tula Arsenal, at least main production, although Izhmash, back then Izhevsk, would make prototypes sometimes. Production would last until around 1993 in Russia, and really about the only nation to officially produce the AKS74U, the Krinkov, besides Russia, was Bulgaria, who obtained a license to produce the AK-74 series in 1984. Other nations have made kind of inspired versions, but not true cranks. For example, East Germany had the MPI M74K. Of course, we all know Romania has done a number of short little carbines. And even before the crank came out, Hungary, FEG, had their AMD 65. And while in Russia, the crank has mostly been replaced by newer guns like the AK-105. There are actually some still floating around because it is still a valid PDW gun today. Okay, with that said, you see how this spring loads? It actually has a spring-loaded plunger up here to keep this on. One fun thing, the way this is designed, if I had a free hand I would show you, if you pull the bolt back, you can take the upper handguard off without even taking the internals out, but let's go ahead and take them out. Standard AK spring. I'm doing my best. Hard to do things one-handed sometimes. Here's our bolt. The bolt itself is the same. You notice the short handle and the very short gas piston. It barely exists. So with that out, we can easily pull handguard off. Now on your standard AKM, AK74, the latch is in the inside and it folds out to take your lower handguard off. On a crink, it's on the outside, so it's opposite. You rotate it up. Sometimes I can do these by hand. They're basically meant to be done with a cleaning rod. Can almost get it. Not bad for a new gun. Like I said, I've almost got it all the way, but it's starting to resist, so I'm going to go grab a cleaning rod or something just to move it the rest of the way before I do something with my finger. Be right back. Easy, easy. I actually just used the empty end of a Wheeler screwdriver, and I just fit it over the tab and rotate it when they're not too difficult. That way it doesn't slip. And then once you do that, the retainer will slide forward, and your handguard with heat shield comes off. As for our upper, you basically want to grip it and just rotate it 180 degrees and it'll come off. And to put our new handguard on, straightforward, you just plug it back in and then flip the lever. It's really quite simple, but I don't believe I'll be able to get either one done with one hand. So let me stick those on and I will pick right back up with you. Show you the inside. That's what's neat about the 104. It's a factory built semi-auto crank. All the other ones out there are kit builds, which is cool, but not factory. And the Zastava M92 PV, again, a cool gun, but it's different. If nothing else, you don't have this real fun spring-loaded dust cover to play with. Reminds me of a car hood. Alright, one down. Wasn't too bad, no sanding required. I just used a rubber mallet to make sure it was fully seated back. At first it wasn't going back quite far enough to let the latch go all the way forward. So once I tapped it lightly with the mallet, it went back far enough, things compressed enough, and it went on. It's nice and tight, but not overly so. Notice too on the crank handguard how it kind of overlaps the receiver a little bit on the bottom. Kind of neat. Well, with that said, let's move on to the upper. Alright. All you need to do is grab the flat end with a vise of some type. I've been known to use even like a wrench in my legs. But either way, get it nice and steady and then just twist. Sometimes you can do it with bare hands like these, but on a lot of them, especially the ones for later ones like the Sega, it's usually a good idea to it's usually a good idea to wear padded gloves, or at least, you know, those thin grippy gloves, just to make sure you don't hurt yourself, and to give you that, because sometimes they can be a bear. And one thing, these are used handguards. I like using used because they're already kind of pre-fitted for a gun. Sometimes you have to do minor fitting, sometimes they will fit a little loose, but generally speaking, they're good to go. When you buy brand new or unissued furniture, it is intentionally oversized. You will spend a lot of time woodworking, carving, especially for this upper, because you want to get it nice and round, but you also will need to carve for the front. It takes a lot of time, and I just don't have that. And plus, I kind of like the been there military look, and you can always refinish them to make them look even better. So with that said, let's get this buttstock off. It's very straightforward. Under here, there is a hole. When the dust cover is open, you can take a punch and a light hammer and just simply push it up, and the stock comes right off. At least in theory. Sometimes they can fight you. So let's see how my luck is running today. Easy or not. So far I've got away pretty easy, especially with the upper handguard. It dropped right in. Like I said, the lower required just a couple of light taps with a mallet. If you don't like working with a mallet, AKs are not your thing, because a mallet is actually part of the official armor's toolkit. Just kind of how the guns are. And another one right out. CJ. There's your original stock. Couldn't be simpler. There's the inside. The pins are even stepped, tapered, so there's really no way, unless you really maybe force it, to put these in backwards. What's nice about how they're tapered too, they can't really walk out, walk down, and on the top, when it's closed, the dust cover keeps it from having the potential to walk up. But honestly, they are tight enough, thanks to how they're designed, that they don't really do that. At most, if it's fighting you, you can have the stock loose, so you're not fighting the spring tension from the latch, but usually you don't even do that. But if you need to, it's worth pointing out, if you ever have a fixed stock gun and convert it, just know that the angle is very specific on the back of this receiver. So if you're cutting a standard receiver to use one of these stocks, you definitely want to get the angles and everything right. Well, let's pop this metal one on. When putting the pin in, I like to kind of have the stock in a neutral position. Typically the pin will go in halfway, maybe even 3/4 of the way before you meet real resistance. You should be able to get it in at least far enough to guide the stock. After that, another couple of taps with your mallet and punch, and it should seat. And then after it's in, we want to check to make sure the stock locks up. I'm trying to think how to do this one-handed. Hang on. There we go. Needed my right hand for that. Sorry about that. So yeah, we've locked up tight. This is our button. Let's see how the other side looks. If it sticks out too far, sometimes we need to adjust it, but actually this one, it's just barely more than flush with the receiver, which is what we want. And now we're getting pretty cranky. Let's get the internals back in. And yeah, have a few final thoughts, and then I'll let you go. Well, how's she looking now? A bit more like something you might have seen in the 80s. Of course, we still have this long barrel. I removed the cap it comes with. It's not welded or anything, it just unscrews. It's just held on typical AK style with the detent. Since the collar comes out, it makes it very easy to know exactly where to cut your barrel if you want to go the SBR route. You just zip it off here, recrown, and then you can put on a crank booster. Not only does this act as a good flash hider, which is very important on a barrel just over 8 inches, it has an expansion chamber in the back to give a little bit more back pressure, just to ensure reliability. And also some of your unburnt powder from the 545 cartridge will get caught in there. So if you have one of these, you'll want to clean it, but it is chrome lined, so that makes life a little easier. Again though, if you want to go to that step of cutting your barrel down, obey all SBR rules and laws, you'll need to file for a form, and then when you get approval back, you can cut the barrel down and engrave your gun. After that, it's a Class 3 firearm, so there are some restrictions, and some states just don't allow them at all. Another thing, people talk about the twist rate. I did address this on a personal channel video, so you can check that out for my full thoughts, but originally, like the AK74, this had a 1 in 7.8 twist, and that did fine initially, but when they started using these in the cold, high-altitude mountains of Afghanistan, they noticed that some of their newer projectiles, heavier projectiles, were not stabilizing. So in Russia, they went later on to a 1 in 6.3 twist. A lot of people like to boil this and say 1 in 8 to 1 in 6, which makes it sound like it's a 2-inch difference. It's actually 1.5 difference. And it really only matters in certain climates. The U.S. military experienced much the same thing with the M16. That's one reason they went from the 1 in 14 to the 1 in 12 twist. During testing in Alaska, it showed some issues. But really the worst that'll happen is you'll get a bit of egging. Not even really full-on keyholing. It was not a big enough of an issue that Bulgaria ever changed it. So all the Bulgarian produced crinks just kept the original 1 in 7.8 twist. That includes the factory SBRs we received from Kvar. And I've even picked up some original Bulgarian 8.2-inch barrels, and they were still the 1 in 7.8 twist. So it's one of those things to know, but it's not really worth worrying about. But I know that worrying over things is kind of the internet's pastime, so hey, if that's your thing, gives you joy, knock yourself out. So what do you think of our gun here? Is it crinky enough to crink with? Or does it need a little something else? I know what. Be right back. That's better. Crinks always look better with Bakelite, don't they? Even to me. I also put the Russian sling on. Nothing wrong with the sling these come with, but it's just not a crink sling. People ask the difference. Like I said, it is thinner. It also has this buckle on the end. Has 2 keepers instead of 1. And the idea is you can easily connect it. It stays clipped in the front. You can disconnect it from the back for paratrooper or whatever use. It's also just this lighter. Come on. This one's also tangled up. There we go. And there you have it. And this, once you dress them up like this really seems to show people this is a true AKS74U. Because a lot of times when they're describing the SLR-104UR, they just say it's the one with the long barrel. Because I don't think in pictures it really comes across what this is. They just don't get how light and handy it can be, or how compact it really is. The modern black furniture is probably, in a practical sense, better, but yeah, it's just no substitute for the classic crink look. So popular. I get asked all the time, but I'd rather have a gunsmith, you know, say Russian or Bulgarian kit built on a US receiver, crink, and those can be built as pistols, or one of these, and it's one of these. Up until recently, they were even cheaper, or at least the same price as a gunsmith build. Now that's kind of flipped, but there's just something about true factory-built imports. Plus, these are built on the same tooling, but the same people who do the military ones. They're built from all new serial matching parts, so you don't have to worry about worn out this. And unfortunately, with US guns now, not only will the receiver end up being American, but these days, usually the barrel will be American too. And there's just no substitute for this cold hammer forged and chrome-lined barrel that original combat factories use. Not so much that it's more accurate, it's more in the longevity department. They just last a long time. It doesn't seem like American barrels have the high round count ability, and that's really important on something like a crink that runs pretty hot. 5.45 x 39 is a hot little round, high velocity already, and because of the short gas system and everything, it can cook away a barrel pretty quick. Speaking of gas systems, the original ones in 2013 had a standard crink front sight gas block. In 2014, they started putting a small donut restrictor to make the gas port effectively smaller. That's because with this long barrel, with the extra dwell time and everything, the 2013 guns were effectively overgassed to hell and back. So the newer ones, they put that little end, that way you could shoot it as a 16-inch carbine without risking damage. It's extremely easy to take out. All you need to do is just take the pins out of your gas block, push it off the barrel, and then it basically just comes out. Sometimes they almost just fall out. Otherwise, you might just pull them out. But it's just a little plug in there. The gas port on the barrel and everything is not affected. But yeah, these went from kind of a lesser known but still appreciated gun to today people are wanting them, which we kind of knew would happen. It's extremely unlikely that more will come in. Now, will KVAR release more from this older stock? Yeah, probably. But as far as a whole fresh 2020 import batch, it doesn't look likely. I said that a couple of years ago. Bulgaria just doesn't seem to want to do 5.45. And I've explained why in other videos. It's just not a cartridge they like. It was forced upon the Combat nations by Soviet Russia, so they don't really feel like they had a choice in adopting it in some cases. And also, nations like Bulgaria are operating more and more with NATO, and in some cases have joined NATO. And so they need to be able to use the standard ammunition of their allies. So it just makes sense for them to focus on 5.56. They also still do guns in 7.62 39 because that's a very popular round in Africa, the Middle East. 5.45 never really gained traction there. I was wanting to do a revisit of the 104UR anyway, and since I needed to work on this customer's gun, I thought, yeah, combine the two, show you what you can do to yours. Very simple, very easy. Very few tools really required, especially if you use surplus handguards. And it's ready to go to the range. It's even a very easy SBR project if you want to go that route. Well, if you have any questions about the 104UR or the AKS74U, Jay and I, since we own one each, will do our best to help. He's had more experience with scope mounting and such. He's also tried it with the drum, as you saw. They run very well, and considering how light they are, they're a lot of fun. With that said, if you could, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you'd like to help support the channel, please check out the link to our Patreon page. This is Misha, and we'll catch you very soon next time.